YouTube Best Team. Before the world heard her name, before the bright lights and roaring applause, her story began in silence, inside a fragile wooden house tucked between narrow alleys in Cebu, Philippines. The house leaned slightly to one side, as if even it was tired of standing against the weight of time and hardship. Its walls were made of patched plywood, darkened by years of rain and heat. The tin roof rattled whenever the wind blew, singing its own rough melody above the sounds of the city. Inside that house lived a young Filipino girl, small in size, soft-spoken, and unknown to the world. She had no fancy microphone, no vocal coach, and no grand stage. Her stage was the cracked cement floor. Her microphone was her own trembling voice. And her audience, most days, was only the echo bouncing off the walls. Every morning, she woke before the sun rose. Not because she wanted to, but because life demanded it. The roosters crowed outside, motorbikes roared past the narrow street, and the smell of fried fish drifted in from nearby stalls. Her mother moved quietly around the room, preparing for another long day of work, careful not to wake her daughter too suddenly. There was no alarm clock, only responsibility. The girl helped with small chores before school. She fetched water in a plastic container, swept dust from the doorway, and folded the thin mattress they shared at night. Her school uniform was clean but worn, washed countless times until the fabric had softened and faded. Still, she wore it with pride. Education, her mother often said, was the only door that might open someday. But singing, that was the window where her soul escaped. When the house was empty, when her mother had left and the noise outside softened, she sang. She sang softly at first, unsure if the neighbors would complain. But as the melody grew, so did her courage. Her voice carried emotion far beyond her years, pain, hope, longing, and quiet strength. It was the kind of voice that didn't just sound beautiful, it felt honest. Sometimes, neighbors paused outside. A man fixing his bicycle would stop and listen. A woman carrying groceries would slow her steps. Children playing nearby would fall silent. No one said anything, they just listened. In a place where struggle was normal and dreams were rare, her voice felt like a moment of peace. Her mother first realized something was different one evening after returning from work, exhausted and worried. She heard singing before opening the door. Not loud, but powerful. When she stepped inside, she saw her daughter standing barefoot, eyes closed, singing with everything she had. The mother didn't interrupt. She leaned against the doorframe, tears forming quietly. She had always known her daughter loved music, but this was more than love. This was purpose. Life had never been kind to them. The girl's father had left years ago, chasing promises that never returned. Her mother worked long hours doing laundry, cleaning homes, and selling food when she could. Money was never enough. There were days when meals were skipped and nights when worry replaced sleep. Yet through it all, the girl never complained. Instead, she sang. She sang while washing dishes. She sang while doing homework by dim light. She sang while rain leaked through the roof, dripping into buckets placed strategically on the floor. Each note felt like a prayer, soft, sincere, and hopeful. At school, teachers noticed her too. During small events, she was asked to sing. She stood nervously in front of classmates, hands shaking, voice wavering at first, then soaring. Applause followed, surprising her every time. For a brief moment, she felt seen. But reality always returned. Talent alone did not pay bills. Dreams did not fix broken roofs. And opportunities like America's Got Talent felt impossibly far, another world entirely. Cebu was her universe, and survival was its law. One night, after dinner of rice and salt, her mother sat beside her. The girl talked quietly about singing on a big stage someday. She spoke carefully, as if afraid the dream might break if spoken too loudly. Her mother listened. She didn't promise fame. She didn't promise success. She simply said, "If God gave you this voice, there must be a reason." That sentence stayed with the girl. From that moment on, singing was no longer just an escape, it was a mission. She practiced whenever she could. She studied songs from old phones, mimicking emotions she barely understood but deeply felt. Love, heartbreak, loss, she poured them all into her voice. It didn't matter that she was young. Her soul had already lived many lives. Late at night, lying beside her mother, she imagined bright lights and a crowd that didn't know her story yet. She imagined judges who would listen, not to her clothes or background, but to her heart. She didn't know about Simon Cowell. She didn't know about standing ovations. She didn't know about superstars. All she knew was this: singing made the pain quieter. And somewhere, deep inside that fragile wooden house in Cebu, a true superstar was being born, long before the world was ready to listen. She stood backstage, hidden behind the thick black curtains of the America's Got Talent stage, clutching the small tag pinned to her clothes. The numbers on it felt heavy, as if they carried the weight of her entire life. The noise of the audience echoed through the walls, thousands of voices, laughter, anticipation. For a girl from a tiny wooden house in Cebu, it felt unreal, almost frightening. Her hands were shaking. A production assistant gently placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. "You're next," they said. She nodded, though her throat was tight. She thought of her mother, waiting anxiously in the wings. She thought of the cracked floor back home, the leaking roof, the neighbors who used to stop and listen. This stage was bigger than anything she had ever imagined, but fear threatened to steal her breath. The curtain opened. Bright white lights exploded in front of her, blinding at first. The crowd came into view, row after row of strangers staring at her, judging her before she even sang a single note. She took small steps forward, each one feeling heavier than the last. At the judges' table sat Simon Cowell, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He had seen thousands of auditions. Dreams walked onto this stage every day, and many walked off broken. Simon glanced at her briefly, then down at his notes. A young girl, nervous, from Cebu. Another hopeful story, perhaps. "So," Simon said, his voice sharp but calm, "tell us your name." Her voice trembled as she introduced herself. She spoke about her home, about her mother, about how singing was the only thing that made her feel strong. The audience listened politely. Some smiled. Others waited. Then Simon asked the question every contestant feared. "And why did you come here?" She paused. "Because singing is my hope," she said softly. "I want to help my family." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Simon raised an eyebrow, not impressed yet, not convinced. He had heard stories like this before. "All right," he said. "Let's hear you sing." The music began. At first, it was just a single piano note, soft, cautious, almost fragile. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and sang the first line. The sound that came out of her was not small. It was powerful, controlled, deep with emotion. Within seconds, the room changed. Simon looked up sharply. The audience leaned forward. Her voice carried something unexpected, not just talent, but truth. Every note felt lived in, like a story told through sound. She wasn't performing at the audience, she was inviting them into her life. As the song built, so did the energy in the theater. Her fear disappeared, replaced by something stronger, belief. She sang like she had nothing to lose and everything to give. Halfway through the song, something rare happened. Applause. Not at the end, during the performance. The crowd couldn't hold it in. Cheers erupted, claps echoing through the hall. One of the judges covered their mouth in shock. Another nodded slowly, eyes wide. Simon sat still, but his expression had changed. The crossed arms loosened. His jaw tightened. His eyes never left her. She reached the high note, the one she had practiced 1,000 times back in Cebu. For a split second, fear returned. But she pushed through, pouring every struggle, every hungry night, every unspoken dream into that single moment. And she nailed it. The note soared. Clean. Emotional. Unforgettable. When the final note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the theater exploded. The audience jumped to their feet in a standing ovation. Cheers thundered from every direction. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to understand what was happening. She looked toward the judges, overwhelmed. Simon Cowell stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. He clapped. Not fast, not loud, but with purpose. The room grew quieter as everyone noticed. Simon leaned forward, took the microphone, and spoke. "I wasn't expecting that," he said honestly. "You know, people walk onto this stage every day. Most of them think they're good. Very few actually are." The audience held its breath. "You," Simon continued, pointing gently toward her, "have something very special. That wasn't just singing. That was feeling. That was real." Her hands trembled again, this time from disbelief. "I think," Simon said, pausing, "the world needs to hear your voice." Tears streamed down her face. She searched for her mother backstage, who was already crying uncontrollably, hands over her mouth. The judges praised her, her control, her emotion, her courage. But Simon's words stayed in the air, heavier than applause. In that moment, everything changed. A poor girl from Cebu had walked onto one of the biggest stages in the world, and walked off as something more. Not just a contestant, not just a dreamer, but a true discovery. And as the lights dimmed and the cheers continued, Simon Cowell knew something rare had happened.